Filmspotting is presented by Regal Unlimited, the all-you-can-watch movie subscription pass that pays for itself in just 2 visits. Sign up now in the Regal app or at the link in the show description and use code FILMSPOT25, that's FILMSPOT25, to receive your discount.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online, Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
What kind of a show are you guys putting on here today?
You're not interested in art?
No.
Now look, we're going to do this thing. We're going to have a conversation.
From Chicago, this is Filmspotting. I'm Adam Kempenaar.
And I'm Josh Larson.
I've been all over this world. I seen men die in ways I ain't even know was possible.
With his new period horror film Sinners, Ryan Coogler has concocted a few new ways for men to die. On screen, anyway.
We've got a review of the latest from the director of Black Panther and Creed. And speaking of period films, we go back to the Middle Ages for the next film in our Tarkovsky marathon, Andrei Rublev. Plus, the championship round of Filmspotting Madness.
It's all ahead.
There will be blood, Josh.
On Filmspotting.
I have a competition in me. I want no one else to succeed.
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're gonna love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
Welcome to Filmspotting. This is it, Josh. The Filmspotting Madness Best of the Century final. A bit later, we will get to the matchup, the 2 films that will duke it out for Filmspotting Madness supremacy, and we have a 3rd place consolation match as well.
It always comes so quickly. I got to say, all the months and months of work, prep you and Sam put into it, all the agonizing listeners do about how they're going to vote, and then suddenly we're here, about to crown a champion.
Voting is live right now in that Filmspotting Madness final. You can go to filmspotting.net/madness, but we'll have all the details later in the show. Also later, Josh, you'll have a review of The Legend of Ochi, which opens this weekend. Every generation gets the Goonies it deserves.
That's pretty apt, actually, I think.
It's also week 2 of our Andrei Tarkovsky marathon. 1966's Andrei Rublev was 3 hours in medieval Russia. Enough for you, Josh, or were you craving more?
Is it crazy to say I could have had more?
Sure.
It's especially where it leaves us, though. I think where it leaves us, I'm like, let's go. I'm ready.
Ultra bleak, but it's Tarkovsky, so you just kind of want to sit in that space for a little while longer somehow. See the full Tarkovsky lineup and more at filmspotting.net/marathons. But first, Ryan Coogler's Sinners. It's Coogler's first film since the 2022 Black Panther sequel, Wakanda Forever, and his first original is non-IP, what we call it, Josh, since his celebrated 2011 debut, Fruitvale Station. But like every film since his debut, it does feature Michael B. Jordan, this time in a dual role as twin brothers Smoke and Stack. Such great names. After years away, the brothers return to their hometown in the Jim Crow-era South, only to find a supernatural evil awaiting them. Here's Wunmi Mosaku and Omar Benson Miller in a clip.
What y'all doing? Just step aside and let me on in now.
Why you need him to do that? You big and strong enough to push past us?
Well, that wouldn't be too polite now, would it, Miss Annie? I don't know why I'm talking to you anyway. Smoke.
Don't talk to him. You talking to me right now. Why you can't just walk your big ass up in here without an invite, huh? Go ahead. Admit to it.
Admit to what?
That you dead.
To my mind, Adam, we heard in that clip one of the highlights of Sinners, Wunmi Mosaku, in the supporting role of Annie, this former lover to Michael B. Jordan, Smoke. Annie knows a thing or two about the spiritual world, which comes in handy when things get spooky in Sinners. I remember Mosaku from the HBO series Lovecraft Country, which had a similar vibe to Sinners and also gave her a chance to display a similar power and authority. She's great here, as are other supporting players. Like, how about Delroy Lindo as an aging bluesman? Or Jack O'Connell. Remember him in Starred Up, a movie
I do.
We both loved. Adam and I had lost track of
We
him.
were right. We were right about Jack O'Connell.
Apparently.
It took 11 years, but we were right.
He plays an Irish immigrant here who, let's say, wants to bring his own sort of music to the juke joint where much of the action takes place. And of course, there is Michael B. Jordan in this dual lead role of twins, Smoke and Stack. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on his performance. So, incredible ensemble cast, anchoring some thrilling moments where writer-director Ryan Coogler and his filmmaking team employ cinematography, music, sound design, choreography to create sequences that are dazzlingly cinematic. But is Sinners more than those showstoppers, Adam? Does it all hold together? This is a film running well over 2 hours. It shifts gears rather abruptly, I feel, about halfway through from a period drama to a genre exercise. And it includes an extensive post-credit sequence set decades later than the main narrative. So I want to know, does all that ambition pay off for you? Is Sinners a collection of great cinematic moments, or does it add up to something more monumental?
Well, can't we just enjoy all those great cinematic moments? Maybe that's
Absolutely.
enough, Josh. And I think here it probably could be enough, because as good as Coogler's work to date has largely been, I wasn't fully prepared for how burly, I'm going to say, and how fun this film is. These two movies otherwise have almost nothing in common, but the last time I felt like I could recommend a movie to anyone, from cinephile to casual moviegoer and everybody in between, it was The Holdovers. And I was with family for Easter, and I had multiple people who I don't normally have conversations with about movies come up to me and ask me if I had seen it yet, because they just saw Sinners and loved it.
Really?
It didn't surprise me. It did not surprise me a bit. And it didn't surprise me a bit to see that it won the box office either. And there's a lot of conversation around how much money it made, because it's a film working on every level, on the levels of story, performance, production. We can add in some specific production elements like cinematography, like Ludwig Göransson's score. All of the music in this film. Sinners is a redemption movie, a revenge movie with elements of blaxploitation, and certainly a red blood-soaked horror movie. It's also deeply romantic and has the rhythms and audaciousness of some of our boldest musicals. Coogler seems to be drawing from a deep well of cinematic and artistic influences, but still making a film that feels so personal, as if it's been shaped and sharpened his entire life. Everything he's done professionally and everything he's experienced personally has been shaped and sharpened into this. And I said that the great cinematic moments might be enough, but the fact is, Josh, I do think all the ambition pays off. I think there is more. I think there's revelation too. Revelation that goes beyond the transcendence of Preacher Boy, Sammy, his musical number that comes maybe about halfway into this film. Otherwise, Josh, you know the scene I'm talking about, the early favorite for scene of the year. And if something somehow does beat it out, it's undoubtedly the music moment of the year.
You can always slot it in there, right?
Right. There's a choice Coogler makes and a line that he gives us in the screenplay that really gives you something to chew on in the moment and after you've left the theater. And I don't think I'm getting into spoiler territory here. It's all stuff that's hinted at or suggested in the trailer, and based on the box office, I'm assuming and hoping that most people who are listening to this conversation, Josh, have seen the movie. The choice is making that lead vampire, played by Jack O'Connell, his character's name is Remick, making him Irish. And the line is, "I want your music. I want your stories." The wrinkle here with these vampires is that once bitten, Remick and presumably the other vampires that he's turned, they consume not just you, but your entire being, your identity, your memories, your thoughts, your feelings. So on a literal level, it's as if all that knowledge imbues him with more and more power, which enables him to go on surviving and to go on consuming. But metaphorically, and aren't vampires always a metaphor for something? This is Black culture we're talking about with our main characters. This is Black art, Black narratives being consumed and exploited. So let's just say when I saw the movie and then a couple hours later saw somebody tweet about how Ryan Coogler orchestrated a deal where ownership rights revert to him after 25 years, I thought, yeah, that checks out. That really checks out based on what I just saw unfold. That character then, Remick, is the villain. He's insidious and evil, and he is white. But by making him Irish, at least the implication or the suggestion, Josh, that I'm still unpacking is that he represents a group of people and a culture with its own unique stories and its own unique stories of suffering and exploitation, with its own music and its own language, which we hear. And he was possibly once preyed upon then too, which also somehow makes him potentially sympathetic. It's a layer I found just so striking, and it's something that I haven't shaken. And it's significant that there is something attractive, Josh, sinister, but attractive about joining Remick's community. That's what they are outside the juke joint. They're a collective, or at least that's what he intentionally makes them present themselves as. They dance in a circle. They sing in unison. They have this shared joyous experience. They've all been assimilated. And if you're someone who has spent your whole life having to fight to survive because the dominant white culture doesn't accept you, it would seem awfully enticing to want to be part of that community, potentially, wouldn't it? And I haven't even mentioned that, and I won't mention for fear of spoilers, that post-credit sequence that you mentioned. And someone online here reminded me as well that that's something Coogler has pretty much done throughout all of his films. He likes to have a post-credit sequence that is actually doing a lot of work and isn't extraneous by any means, actually seems crucial to the film. That's certainly the case here, where all I'll say is a character makes a choice that maybe is a bit surprising, but only because we think we know what that character is going to do, largely because of so many other movies or movie characters who have been put in similar predicaments. And maybe I should have been smarter based on the film I just watched for 2 hours and 17 minutes that, of course, Ryan Coogler wasn't going to do anything conventional and would surprise us in that moment as well.
So you've already teased out a couple of the major ideas at play here, which I absolutely agree with that they're in it. I think if my enthusiasm is a little tempered, where I might be more on the end of amazing cinematic moments, provocative ideas throughout, I don't know if it all adds up to a cohesive thing to the same degree, is let's stick with your Remick example. All right. Because that line you quoted about wanting your music, wanting your stories, there's absolutely elements in this film that connect with that and support that. And that could be a theme. I think the standout sequence that you've already mentioned, so we'll talk a little bit more about it here and move on. But this single take sequence at the juke joint during a musical performance with all the dancers on the floor, and we're swooping through them, among them. And suddenly we realize, wait a minute, is that a DJ over there?
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
A bit anachronistic. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. And then we move on, and then there's, some rappers over here, and the sound design, which I think is like one of the MVP elements of this film. The sound design is incorporating those styles to the larger song we're hearing. So this is all touching on exactly what you just mentioned, Adam, about this idea of Black art, how it has transformed over the eras, but also been co-opted over the eras. And here's a space where it is being held and treasured in community. That completely aligns with the I want your music, I want your stories from Remick. But we also have that other element you talked about, him being an Irish immigrant, referencing his own oppression as an Irish immigrant and losing control of himself. Here's where a whole nother thematic thread comes in, the prospect the specter of religion as an oppressive force, as decidedly against the freedom that the music at the juke joint is enabling folks to experience. And so there I thought, okay, this is fascinating that he is trying to win over this group by saying, listen, I've had religion force-fed to me as well. There's a moment where a character thinks he's going to die and he starts saying the Lord's Prayer. And how creepy when the horde, it's almost like this Borg horde they are. I'm going to probably get in trouble with Star Trek people on that. But something like this, they all start chanting the Lord's Prayer too, but in a mocking way. And the point of that, Remick says, is listen, we've been manipulated by religion as well. I'm offering you something separate and freeing. But that's at the same time kind of different and not exactly in parallel with his being representative of white appropriation of Black culture. So it's almost like this is a movie stuffed with so many intriguing ideas, and they're not all working in concert. The one that I did latch onto, and I think gives it its most cohesion, is this idea of music as liberation. We see that in the very opening scene, again, where Sammy, played by Miles Catton, the young cousin of Smoke and Stack, who's an aspiring blues player, he's in this opposition with his pastor father, right? And he sees music as offering the liberation of Saturday, and then he says to his father, and then I'll come back on Sunday. He sees this stark secular sacred line, which is another fascinating idea the movie sort of explores. And so there's just so much going on here. I have to admit, there is a part of me, you got the great word. You found the great word. I was trying to figure out, how do I describe this as something other than big? Burly is the word. There's part of me that admires the burliness, but also wishes, man, what if this had been an 85-minute genre piece from the get-go? Like the vampire thing was in the opening sequence. And it's not only that would have cut back on the running time, but I wonder if that sort of forced discipline would have made Coogler realize, what do I really want this to be about? What can this, to your point about vampire metaphors, what can this really capture well and richly, not heavily, not obviously, but in a thrilling genre exercise? And maybe that's just my own taste. That's not to take away from what's accomplished here. I think maybe if push came to shove, I would say, just give me it all. Give me it all if it's a little messy, a little contradictory in theme, but I still get all of these characters. A bigger movie allows for more characters, all of this music, and all of these sequences we've already touched on. So I'm a little torn on it, but if I'm slightly less enthusiastic than you, it's for that reason.
Yeah, I never felt that contradiction. And to go with another C word that you used, I felt that it was ultimately cohesive. And maybe more importantly, I saw it as just adding these interesting layers of complexity. And so for me, having this film not be the 85-minute genre exercise, as much fun as that might be, this film manages to be fun, but still really give us something to think about as well. And you talked about all of those characters, the scale of this film. I think what I'm most impressed with is that we do meet so many characters, and there are so many different, not only themes, but just narrative threads. It should feel so much more, it didn't to me, obviously, it should feel so much more unwieldy and messier than it is. And I never felt that messiness, Josh.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I wouldn't say it's unwieldy.
Okay, except for maybe, I will say this, when the blood really starts spilling, I had two reactions. One, a character makes a choice that the plot needs the character to make. And I'm not saying that Coogler didn't give us the crumbs in the forest to lead us on the trail to make us understand why that character makes that choice. But I, even with those crumbs, didn't fully believe it. It felt a little bit too much like a plot contrivance for me. And then the action itself, the only bit of filmmaking I will question at all in this film. And I do want to go back and watch it again and see if maybe there was something about it that I just found distracting. But when the big battle scene occurs in this film, that's the only part where I felt Coogler losing his way a little bit in terms of the intense focus otherwise of this film. And maybe intense focus is the best way I can describe one of the things I loved about it, that burliness that comes just from Michael B. Jordan's dual performance as Smoke and Stack. The prologue is really interesting. That moment right after the prologue that brings us to the moment before we go back a day to all of these events. That's certainly provocative as well. But Josh, I knew this movie was going to be something when he opened that third scene, if you will, on Smoke and Stack just sitting there by the car with the angle, the kind of low angle on those two, that very natural light outside, the looks on their faces, that intense focus. Characters who seem to have not just a toughness, but a hardness to them that I think the entire movie reflects, but they also are still open to. They haven't been killed inside. They're not dead inside. They're still open to some of the wonders of the world. They certainly still have feelings for each other as brothers, and they have aspirations that and ambitions that you can really respect. You get to the moment where chaos ensues, and it felt like chaos for me in a film that otherwise felt so controlled, but controlled in the best way, where when Coogler wants to take the roof off the place, quite literally, the roof comes off and you believe it in that moment. In those moments, in some of those fight scenes, I didn't understand where the characters were. I didn't understand what the characters were doing. I didn't understand completely how the characters were even surviving.
Yeah.
And that's the only part for me, Josh, that I am uneasy about.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, it reminds me that the climactic fight scene in Black Panther is, a real weak spot for that film too. And
I felt so too.
It's a similar sort of fight choreography and staging. There's some of that here too. And then I will also say there is sort of an epilogue before the credits, though, that I don't want to get into too much, but it involves an encounter with the Klan, which has been another story thread that's popped up that also seemed strange in and of itself in terms of why it's there, but also
that's that blaxploitation element.
It definitely gives you some of that blaxploitation, cathartic. Yes, that is that element as well. But yeah, in terms of the staging too, I think it's similar to that chaotic fight sequence you're talking about. But in terms of, Michael B. Jordan, this lead performance, I want to hear a little bit more from you on that, because I at once loved it because he's having such a good time and is so charismatic, and who doesn't want two Michael B. Jordans, but also was left a little wanting, if that makes sense. I really feel like this movie for me needed a more distinctive separation between Smoke and Stack. And the character outlines are there, right? Stack is looser. He's freer. And I love how he's sort of this tempter with booze and money right away. He walks around town and he's cajoling everyone. And then Smoke he's more tightly wound. He's the planner of the two. He's making sure, the bills get paid, however bills they're working with. So I get those character sketches, but I think in terms of just the feel of the two of them, there is a climactic fight, I think we can say, that would have, for it to matter more beyond just the basic logistics, I think we would had to have had a sense of the difference, or at least the tension between these brothers earlier for that to really work. It actually made me think of his performance in Coogler's Fruitvale Station. Oscar Grant, I think, is the real world figure he's playing there, and how this was a guy he brought. The challenge there was not to make this victim of police violence, a saint or a sinner, to use the language of this movie, but to show that he was fully human. And so Coogler there gave us two sides of one guy he can be rough, he could be intimidating, and then a scene later, or in the same scene to a different character, he can be understanding and loving. And it was those variations in persona from Fruitvale, I'm surprised wasn't more here in Smoke and Stack. Not that he isn't a ton of fun and they don't serve their purpose for the narrative. Part of me also was wondering early on, I didn't know exactly what happened narratively. I knew there was some sort of horror element. I was wondering, are these two more like mythical figures? Like, are we going to find out there's some sort of avenging angels or something? And is that the reason for the thinness? because there was a thinness I detected. And then, of course, we learn, I think one of them, I think it might be Smoke, even says something about he doesn't believe in anything but the power of money. And so they're very much rooted in the here and now. They are not those sort of mythical figures, but I was wondering if it was going to go that way just because of Jordan's performance. But yeah, how did it work otherwise for you?
Yeah, I suppose like the film overall, I'm higher on the performances from Michael B. Jordan. I like the fact that the shades and the distinctions between them are ultimately so subtle. And they're subtle enough that Coogler clearly felt compelled to make sure we always understood which one was which, because one's going to be wearing a red hat and one's going to be wearing a blue hat. Yeah, the costuming makes it clear.
Ruthie
Otherwise,
Carter, we should say, doing the costumes here, one of the greats.
Otherwise, we wouldn't really know who is who, which actually for me made them feel even more like brothers and made Jordan's performance feel more grounded and less theatrical. And maybe that's what I'm so stunned by, is that this is a film that on some level you could call very theatrical. It takes bold swings. This is a movie where Coogler really goes for it, and yet it's so grounded by the Michael B. Jordan performances, but also every other performance in this film. You've mentioned a few already, but how about Haley Steinfeld showing up on screen and getting a part, Josh, where we're all of a sudden in a moment, honestly, the moment she shows up on screen, and it might even be before she says a word, it's just her physicality. We know, or think we know, everything we need to about who that character is in that moment. And there's Steinfeld just reminding us, oh, in case you forgot, I'm not a pop singer. I'm not just the star of a Transformers movie or those Pitch Perfect sequels. I'm a really formidable actress. And I think that's what she proves herself to be here. But again, everybody's doing that. It's one of those performances where I almost feel bad about saying this, but within 2 scenes, you're thinking, so Delroy Lindo is going to win Best Supporting Actor, right? Like, this is a foregone conclusion, right?
I mean, but can we give him his credit if that happens? Yeah. And we have a long ways to go. Who knows what other performances here? I thought that in his first scene, right, where it's like, oh, this is being served on a platter. But also think about the subtlety and physicality he brings to that first scene when he's offered the beer, and how he negotiates his wanting it but not wanting it, not wanting to show he wants it. So in a way, it's one of those showy Best Supporting performances because it has those moments of charisma, but I think he's doing incredibly deft work. Here's what he's required to do in this movie. Adam, Delroy Lindo is at once required to be the comic relief and the sage, like the seer, the fount of wisdom, and not like a holy fool type comic relief wisdom where they're combined. Like, these are 2 different gears he has to shift into, and he shifts into each one perfectly when needed. It's absolutely the groundedness you're talking about. He makes this rooted in a man who has lived a hard life and is here now, and it's going to get harder than he ever could have imagined. And he handles that with humor and with wisdom. There's a moment where he's talking, they're riding along in an open, a convertible down the road, and he's telling the story, and something about how they were paid in liquor, and his musician friend, I forget what happens to the story, but the point is he's asked, what did you do with your money, or what, something like that. And he just says, I drank it. And then it isn't that line. He's holding a flask and he flips the top, I think, closed at that point. And it's that sort of subtle physicality where it's the exclamation point on the story. It's his shame, but it's also his desire to still move ahead. Like, kind of like saying, I'm putting the flask away now. Like, I know, but we all know it's only for this moment. And these are the little touches that a performance like this doesn't need to have for people to say it's a Best Supporting Actor performance. But right. Lindo gives us them anyway.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Perhaps there is shame in that moment. I don't remember the exact dialogue and how it plays out either, but I do recall feeling in that moment that is a really wonderful scene because it's great writing. We understand that it is informing us about the character and their life and the type of choices that they've had to make. But you also get with Lindo a refusal to embrace any kind of sentimentality. He is not going to go for that. He is not going to try to make you feel pity for him as a character. He says something, there's just some line in there, Josh, in the way he says it, where you understand that's the choice he made. And sometimes the choices he makes maybe aren't going to be appreciated or understood by everybody, but then you aren't him. You haven't walked in his shoes, and he is just going to keep on walking. And that's the element that Lindo brings that makes it not just a showy performance. There is so much life that is evident in that character, just years of weariness that we sense within a few minutes.
Is that the scene too, just to go back to the sound design, where as he's telling the story, we hear voices from the story he's telling on the soundtrack and effects that would have happened in the story? If it's not that one, it's maybe another story that Lindo tells. I think it's also in the car though. And the intricacy of this sound design and the layers of music, but also things like that, like enhancing a character's story by audibly bringing elements of it into the foreground. You may not even notice it at first that it's happening, but afterwards you're like, why was that such a vivid? I mean, the performance was great. The writing is great. Oh, it's so vivid because I literally heard what he was describing. That's
it makes
touch
sense.
I don't think we see all that often in films, and it's really effective here.
And it makes sense temporally with this film, a movie that is suggesting how the past and the present and the future, right, can all collide in a way for characters and in certain moments as well. But I really feel like we could go on and on. I want to at least mention, if we're going through the list, Miles Caton, who was a new face to me really as Sammy. And that's another incredible moment that I was thinking could be my music moment of the year, Josh, if it wasn't for the scene that eventually follows. It's the first time we hear him perform.
Wow.
He's in the car. And I don't remember, sorry, despite what I said about how clearly I could distinguish them, I don't remember for sure if it's Smoke or Stack, but he starts playing, and the moment he starts singing, and you see the reaction. You see Michael B. Jordan's reaction to his performing. And yeah, that sounds right. It's Stack. And what he imparts there with that stunned reaction is twofold. I think he's first just sort of stunned that his cousin is that talented. This person he has known his entire life could sing the blues with that type of depth and that type of soul and experience. And then the other part, and I think he actually verbalizes this, is, oh, we're going to make a lot of money.
Exactly.
It's both.
That's how I knew it was Stack, because I remember that part of it. That's the Stack quality, which, speaks to that there are distinctions between them that we come to understand.
Sinners is currently out in wide release. If you see it and agree or disagree with our takes, you can email us feedback@filmspotting.net.
Let me in, man. Some weird shit going on out here.
Listening is the number one thing you can do to support an independently produced show like Filmspotting. A couple more things you could do. Take a minute to give us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Doesn't matter if you're a first-time listener or have been listening for 20 years. Every new review helps us reach new listeners. Another way to support us, you could join the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. Thank you to Family Plus member Jeremy Kennis in Severance, Colorado. I've had a chance to correspond with Jeremy over the years. If you want to follow Jeremy on Letterboxd, he is Jeremy Kennis, Kennis.
Jeremy writes, a buddy turned me on to Filmspotting right about the time Josh took over, been listening ever since. Favorite review or segment? Several, but I'll highlight the episode that Adam did his Jimmy Stewart impression when you all massacred It's a Wonderful Life. Josh barely keeping it together was hilarious. I forgot about that show and that bit. And it does help that I won the prize that week from the previous edition.
Oh, congrats.
What review? Yeah, we got wrong. Easy, Under the Skin. I tried to watch it again after listening to you rave about it, but I just can't get on board even remotely.
Okay.
This, Josh, is one of the, I don't mean it pejoratively, but I'll say oddest Letterboxd top 4 that maybe we've seen in this segment. Rushmore, Guns of Navarone, Jojo Rabbit, and La Femme Nikita.
I mean, that's a 4-pack. You're going a lot of places there.
Yes. A favorite movie Jeremy revisited recently. Well, he's heading to England later this summer, so we watched The Trip. Very smart. A random film or filmmaker that he loves, Formula 51, also known as the 51st State. Now, Josh, we took a little bit of grief, playful and supportive grief, but a little bit of grief from people who were like, you've never heard or you don't know Smooth Talk? Come on, Joyce Carol Oates and Criterion Collection. I can't believe you didn't know this. Well, I'm going to say I don't know Formula 51 or the 51st State.
Well, I didn't think I did, but and here's where I'm going to lose Jeremy. Looking it up now at Larson on Film, a rare 0-star review, Adam.
Oh no, Josh! I was not anticipating that, but here's the best part. I mean, I'll just admit that it shouldn't be a shock that I have blind spots when it comes to Hong Kong action, and this is a film directed by Hong Kong action director Ronnie Yu. It's from 2001, but here's my favorite part. It's reading the brief plot synopsis in the cast. Stars Samuel L. Jackson as a master chemist turned drug dealer with Robert Carlyle, Emily Mortimer as an assassin, and Meatloaf.
I don't believe I'm scanning the review here. I don't believe I even mentioned Meatloaf.
No.
And I must be wrong. Come on. Emily Mortimer as an assassin? That gives you half a star.
0 stars, Josh.
At least.
How many 0 stars are there? How many will I find over at larsononfilm.com?
I mean, there's an easy way to filter the review library. Let me tell you.
Yeah, well, I thought you might do it while I read his next response.
21. 21. 0 stars. I used to be a very unhappy man, Adam.
Apparently. A movie that Jeremy credits with becoming a cinephile. Is that one of your 0 stars? Sling Blade?
No, I'm sure I did not give Sling Blade 0 stars.
Finally, a book about movies or movie making. Now he's just pandering. Movies are prayers, of course.
Well, it was until my Formula 51 slander.
0 stars. Yeah. Who's your savior now, Jeremy? Thank you for joining the family and for all those years of listening. In addition to keeping us doing what we're doing, your support comes with perks. You get to listen early and ad-free. You get the weekly newsletter. You get to be part of the exclusive Filmspotting Family Discord. You also exclusively get to hear our monthly bonus shows coming up very soon. Our April bonus, it's Ask Us Anything. And if you have a question you'd like to submit for that segment, feedback@filmspotting.net is the email. Our May bonus then will be our draft, our new annual tradition, the draft with our Filmspotting Madness bracket contest winner, maybe with a familiar face this year. More on that in a bit. Filmspottingfamily.com is where you can learn everything you need to know about being a family member. Well, after hearing that conversation about Sinners, you can imagine we would recommend seeing it at the theater on the biggest screen you possibly can with the best sound you possibly can. Josh, maybe even see it for free with Regal Unlimited, the all-you-can-watch movie subscription pass that pays for itself in just 2 visits. And in addition to seeing Sinners, our review this week, how about another recent conversation, the 20th anniversary of Pride and Prejudice? That film also playing at Regal. I just looked it up, and Josh, right now, the night we're taping in Chicago, you can see it at Regal City North or see it at Regal Webster Place and playing all throughout this next week. If you've already seen it, but maybe never had the big screen experience, highly recommend visiting or revisiting Joe Wright's Pride and Prejudice. Again, you may be able to see it for free thanks to Regal Unlimited. If you sign up for Regal Unlimited using code FilmSpot25, you will get 10% off a 3-month subscription. It's the only truly limitless movie subscription pass. You get to see any standard 2D movie anytime with no blackout dates or restrictions. And you don't just save money on tickets, you also save on snacks. Regal Unlimited members get 10% off all non-alcoholic concessions. Sign up now in the Regal app or at the link in our podcast description and use code FilmSpot25 to receive your discount.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Your parents have offered you to this cause. They say here, make something of my boy. Protect us. Save us. We are cursed with a wickedness.
The Ochi.
That's from the trailer for The Legend of Ochi, which is new to theaters this weekend. It's directed by Isaiah Saxon. It's his first feature. He's an award-winning music video director and animator. The movie is set on the fictional island of Carpathia, where elusive creatures known as the Ochi are hunted and feared by the island's human population. A young girl, Helena Zengels-Yuri, comes across a baby Ochi and befriends it. Some of the humans, Josh, they're played by Willem Dafoe, Emily Watson, and Finn Wolfhard. A24 ET. That's the vibe I'm getting from the trailer. Am I way off base? And if I'm not, is that a bad thing?
I mean, that's certainly what they want. And maybe it will be for some younger viewers. I don't know. I have a feeling watching this movie, which I wanted to love and I like quite a bit. There's a lot to admire about it, but it never took off into the air like those bicycles in ET, right? And I'm thinking, but few movies do. And sometimes the ones that lodge themselves in your mind when you're a kid are those that, fumble a little bit on takeoff, but are idiosyncratic enough, visionary enough, ambitious enough, weird enough to kind of stick in your memory as a kid, and you come to love them anyway. They're like kiddie cult movies, right? Cult movies we think of as for adults. They're a little risque sometimes or pushing the envelope, but kids can have cult movies too. These weird little movies that most people forget as you grow older, but you'll run into someone and say, hey, you referenced one earlier in the show. Wasn't The Goonies great? And it's like, well, if you watch it again, The Goonies is fine, right? You watch E.T. again, it's a masterpiece. The Goonies, yeah, it's okay. It's a little weird, a little scruffy. I think of, these are going to be 80s titles because that's how old I am, but The Never-Ending Story, or even something like Labyrinth, right? People love Labyrinth, love The Never-Ending Story, but, these are not fantasy or sci-fi films like E.T. And I do think The Legend of Ochi might be something like that because it's overstuffed with characters, way too many motivations going on. I found it to be a little undercooked as a fable, like what it actually wants to be about, wants kids to think about beyond, the obvious. But man, is this thing weirdly unique. And a lot of that has to do with the puppetry, the choice to use puppetry and animatronics, and for the adult Ochi, real actors in costumes. There is that tactility, that real worldness that you need for a children's fantasy movie to root itself in your consciousness. And this absolutely has that. It also has a look that's unique. The colors here are deeply saturated. It's almost like everything's wet in this movie. It's like the wetness has made the colors richer in some way, which I admired. The score by David Longstreth is very flute heavy, which casts this unique hypnotic spell. And yeah, overall, you do feel like you're watching real creatures being discovered, not digitized, just pixels, essentially. And that goes a long way. I think it'll go a long way for lodging itself in younger audiences' minds. So if it at all sounds interesting to you, check it out. You may not love it, but you'll like it. And you'll probably, years from now, someone will say, did you ever see a movie called The Legend of Ochi? And you'll say, no. Oh, yes. That was really great, wasn't it? I think it's one of those. So we'll see what happens.
The Legend of Ochi is currently out in limited release. If you see it and agree or disagree with Josh, email us, feedback@filmspotting.net. Next week on the show, it's Movie Book Talk with Adam, Josh, and Guess. We've got our friend Mariah E. Gates returning to talk about her new book, Cinema Her Way, Visionary Female Directors in Their Own Words. We knew back when Mariah first told us about this book that when it came out, we wanted to have her on the show. And we wanted to do something that wasn't just an interview with her. Can we talk about one of the films that's featured in the book? And it just worked out so serendipitously, Josh, that one of the films she covers is a major blind spot for the two of us that we have wanted to rectify for quite some time.
So embarrassing.
Yeah, Gina Prince Bythewood's Love and Basketball. And this month, just as of about a week ago, it celebrated its 25th anniversary. So we're going to talk about Love and Basketball and Mariah's book with her. And then we're also going to feature my conversation with film writer Violet Lucca, whose latest book is David Cronenberg Clinical Trials, a book that was timed, I think, fittingly to be released around the release of Cronenberg's latest, The Shrouds, a movie that opens in limited release this weekend. Look forward to having both Mariah and Violet on.
Speaking of Cronenberg, this week on our sister podcast, The Next Picture Show, looking at cinema's present via its past, it is part 2 of their Body by Cronenberg pairing. So previously they talked about The Fly from 1986, that one with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, of course. And yeah, this week they're discussing The Shrouds. Can't wait to dig into all that. I'm waiting till I see The Shrouds, and then I'm going to listen to it all together with The Shrouds in my head. But I do love that pairing from The Next Picture Show. New episodes drop every Tuesday, and you can find them wherever you get your podcasts.
Some other bit of housekeeping here, Josh. You threw out, I think on last week's show, that you were going to be going to Tokyo. That's this summer, or no, actually this spring, just next month. That trip is coming up, and we've already gotten 2 responses. You're going to have at least a 2-person meetup, maybe more if we get the word out. So tell us about the Tokyo meetup.
I mean, it's happening. I thought there was a chance. You never know. We hear from listeners every once in a while from far-flung spots around the globe. But yeah, Michael, Tom have already written in and said we'd love to meet up. We're kind of going to be flexible on the date at this point because they both can be, and we want to hear from others if anybody else is out there. It might be May 22 or 23 or 24. So a couple of options there in Tokyo. If you're hearing this and want to join us, feedback@filmspotting.net.
We promoted this last week, but want to mention again that the Chicago Critics Film Festival is coming up, taking place at the Music Box, and it starts May 2nd, runs May 2nd through the 8th. I highlighted one title, Josh, that I have recommended on the show, and if it ever gets a full theatrical release, will definitely be a Golden Brick nominee for me. That's Zodiac Killer Project, which the Fest has showing at 9:30 p.m. on Wednesday, so the second to last night of the festival. That's one title that I can recommend. We will have a few other titles that we'll highlight next week that we are interested in seeing and that you might want to seek out as well. Everything you need to know about getting tickets for the Chicago Critics Film Festival is available at chicagocriticsfilmfestival.com.
This is blasphemy. This is madness.
This is absolute madness.
This is madness. Madness. Madness.
But this is absolute madness, Ambassador. Why should you build such a thing?
Madness. This is Sparta!
It's taken us a couple of months, but Josh, we have our 64 film bracket down to 2. Final 4 results. The Battle of 07. There Will Be Blood versus No Country for Old Men. Not a tight one necessarily, but also not a blowout. There Will Be Blood, though, is going to advance to the final. Beat the Coen brothers 55% to 45%.
I mean, just seems unfair that these two were paired up before the championship round. I guess makes it a little different than some of our earlier Madness matchups. But yeah, how does it feel? I got to know, how does it feel at this point to have it? Is it a little bit like the day after Christmas for you and Sam? Like all of this has gone into it.
I know.
And we're here, and now No Country for Old Men is gone, and that has to make you feel partly responsible.
Yes, it definitely does. I voted for No Country for Old Men in this case, in this Madness iteration. I may not have in a previous one when they faced off, but it feels like an appropriate culmination. It actually feels good, Josh, that it's all
still
coming
Christmas
down
Day for you.
to this. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It still feels like Christmas Day. And part of that is because our second Final Four matchup pitted Mulholland Drive versus Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It was our dream logic contest. And this one was super close. At various points over the past week, it was tied. I don't think there was ever a point where one film had a lead that was greater than 25 votes. And it came out. This is how it ended up, Josh. David Lynch and Mulholland Drive advance to have to face PTA, Daniel Plainview, and his milkshake, 50.86% to Eternal Sunshine's 49.14.
That's ridiculous. Is that, I have a feeling you would know this. There's a spreadsheet somewhere keeping track of this. Is that the closest vote in Madness history? No.
No, it may be the closest in this Madness tournament, but we've had even tighter than that. Okay. We've had ones that have come out under 5 or 6 votes. This one was just slightly more than that. So, Josh, it is There Will Be Blood versus Mulholland Drive for Filmspotting Madness and best of the century so far. Supremacy. We do have that third place matchup. Who will take the consolation prize? Will it be Michel Gondry and Eternal Sunshine, or will it be the Coen brothers and No Country for Old Men? You can vote in the Madness final and that third place matchup now at filmspottingmadness.com or filmspotting.net/madness. Either place will take you there. You could also just go to the main page of filmspotting.net. You can't miss the graphic right there at the top of the page that will take you to the polls. They close Tuesday, April 29th at 5 p.m. Central Time. So next week, Josh, we will be able to announce a winner. For those of you who submitted brackets in the bracket contest, check out how you're doing. Go to Filmspotting Madness, click on View Bracket, go to Predictions, see how everything shook out for you. Once again, we had 825 people who participated. And out of those 825, number one for like 4 weeks in a row is the UK's Ricky Kendall. Ricky picked the correct finals matchup. He has There Will Be Blood defeating Mulholland Drive. Okay. Number 2, Josh, is Steve Mesa. He has the right matchup, but he has Mulholland Drive winning. So it will come down to that. Our winner will come down to who wins the final, either Ricky or Steve. It really can't be anybody else. And I should probably save this for next week if There Will Be Blood does in fact win and Ricky wins this bracket competition for the second year in a row. But this is the truth. I looked this up. If There Will Be Blood wins, if Ricky does end up on top, not only will he have won this competition 2 years in a row, Josh, but he will have correctly predicted 62 out of 63 matchups in each tournament. He got one wrong in the Sweet 16. Otherwise, he picked every other matchup correctly. I still think Ricky needs to use his powers for something better for the good of humanity than this. Yeah. Ricky, give up madness. Find a common good project and apply all your brain power towards that, please. I am betraying nothing here. I haven't looked at where the voting stands as we're taping this. The final polls have just been live for only a few hours. And again, I don't want to look at them. I don't want to give anything away, but I'm just going to say there's certainly a chance that Ricky Kendall could win again. There Will Be Blood was the number 1 seed after all. And if he does, I suppose, Ricky, you should already start thinking about, if you haven't already, what your bonus content draft topic will be. But then again, maybe you don't want to jinx it. You start thinking about things that maybe won't happen. Who knows how Ricky's mind works? We clearly don't. He can obviously manifest whatever he wants into being. Well, Steve Mesa, you are still alive. In terms of our internal competition, Josh. Am I still alive? Well, you're in last place. Alive meaning I might not end up in last place. Yeah, that's definitely the case. Okay. If we stop right now, you're definitely at the bottom. You're 170th overall. Your big oversight was having Parasite in the final against There Will Be Blood. Sam, he's in third place, 152nd overall. He had Eternal Sunshine in the final. Mike Merrigan, Filmspotting Madness, Godfather, a little bit better, 119th overall, second in our competition. Like you, he had Parasite advancing to the final. That means that I am probably temporarily, I am in first place, and I'm 29th overall. That might be the best I've ever been. Again, I think it's going to be short-lived, though I haven't looked. I decided to be daring. I went with Mulholland Drive over There Will Be Blood in the Final. So like Steve Mesa, I have a chance to win this whole thing.
You got a
if
shot.
Mulholland Drive wins. But if Mulholland Drive doesn't win, despite the fact that it seems like I'm crushing the three of you right now, I will finish last.
You could go from first to last.
First to last.
Print
if
out
David Lynch doesn't pull it out.
Print out your certificate now with 29th overall. I see a spot behind you on the wall, an empty spot. You could frame it. And you'll always have this moment, Adam.
Filmspottingmadness.com or filmspotting.net/madness is where you should go for everything Filmspotting Madness related.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Прошу тебя, не уходи. Тебе что, нехорошо со мной, скучно? Но я не буду. Давай сядем, поговорим. Я тебе расскажу.
Я и так все знаю.
Знаешь, я писать больше никогда не буду.
That was from Andrei Tarkovsky's Andrei Rublev from 1966. It is actually the third film, the second entry, but the third film in our Tarkovsky Blind Spots Marathon. We are watching 5 films total over 4 weeks, after which we can claim to be Tarkovsky completists and counted among the world's experts on the Russian master.
Yes.
I'm going to print out that certificate as well.
Please.
I think that's the case, Josh, right?
Because these are movies you just need to watch once and you've got it, right?
Yeah. Or, twice. That's it. You've got it.
Well, Andrei Rublev came in at number 67 on the 2022 edition of the Sight and Sound Top 100. It is one of 3 Tarkovsky films to make that list. Stalker from 1979 is next in our marathon, also made the list, as did 1975's Mirror, which was part of our Sight and Sound Top 100 Blind Spots Marathon a couple of years ago. The subject of Tarkovsky's film here, Rublev, is a historical figure, a painter of religious icons during the 15th century. Tarkovsky and co-screenwriter Andrei Konchalovsky invented much of Rublev's story, of whom little is known. The movie is told in 8 extended chapters, plus there's a prologue and then an epilogue, and it depicts the artist navigating a medieval Russia defined by violence and cruelty. Writing about Andrei Rublev last year in The Reveal as part of their series dedicated to the Sight and Sound Top 100, Keith Phipps wrote that, seeing it for the first time. He was feeling a bit at sea until a scene that helped clarify what Tarkovsky might be after, that the film was about, quote, Rublev's artistic development and the development of his soul. So, Adam, we're coming off, I would say, a relatively straightforward start to this marathon. That's 1961's World War II set Ivan's childhood. You have seen Andrei Rublev before. This was a blind spot for me. So tell me a little bit about, I know it was a while ago, but what your memories of that first viewing, how they informed this one, and what you make of it and its episodic structure today.
Well, even though I was able, Josh, to find some of my notes from 2005, I have to admit that I remember very little about the film specifically. And I think that's because it was 20 years ago. I also think it's because I was ill-equipped 20 years ago to really sink my teeth into Tarkovsky and try to make sense of Andrei Rublev. But that's what we were doing. We were trying to expand our horizons. That's why we did that marathon so early. It's part of why Sam and I also started this show, to give ourselves missions just like that. I was more engaged, and I liked the film that time, but having a little bit more perspective 20 years later, not just on cinema, but on the work of Tarkovsky, having been able to watch and discuss and really appreciate some of his other films like Mirror, as you said, most recently. I think what I was able to put away, Josh, was that compulsion in, I think, all of us as humans, not just as movie watchers when it comes to art, which is to try to make sense of what we're seeing, to try to find a certain logic, to try to understand motivations and see a causality. And what you realize very early on, or what you need to realize very early on with Andrei Rublev, is that that type of temporal logic, that narrative logic, is something that Tarkovsky just really is not interested in at all. And the movie can be confounding because he'll have characters who we met briefly in the first chapter show up all of a sudden in chapter 8, and we have to remember exactly who that character is. And even sometimes within chapters, there's leaps in time. Or you find yourself, for example, after chapter 1 or 2, where Andrei gets called to go off to paint and learn from Theophanes, and he brings Foma, I believe his name is, with him. You assume when you get to that next chapter that they're walking amidst the trees. They must be going to work with Theophanes, and then all of a sudden Theophanes is there with them. And he kind of appears almost like a ghost.
Yeah.
Josh, it's not immediately clear that he was part of their traveling party. And those are the types of lapses in logic that you have to expect with Tarkovsky. For me, what I was able to give myself over to was that episodic structure. Once I realized that you have to see them less as stepping stones to understanding anything factual or actual about Andrei Rublev, the painter and artist, and see them as parables. And that's how I ultimately embraced those chapters. Now, I think in the end, even though we can't necessarily say that any of it is accurate or that accuracy is what he's going for, we know very little about Andrei Rublev, the man. We have his work. It really is. And I think Scott and Keith talk about this in their really eloquent conversation about the film that we referenced earlier in the reveal. It's as if Tarkovsky said, I'm going to take this figure and I'm going to use him to explore questions about sin, about the responsibility of the artist, about Russia itself and its history, about the brutality of man, all these big questions. He's going to use this story simply to be the provocation or the lure to explore some of those big questions, the type of big questions we've seen Tarkovsky explore with his other films. So I don't know if that parables analogy that I'm making resonates with you at all, Josh, but they are stories sometimes that don't even have anything to do directly with Rublev himself. It seems to be more about not only asking some of these big questions or posing some of these big questions, but more about providing a backdrop, a potential backdrop to understand the types of experiences and the environment that might have shaped an artist like Rublev.
I love the parables analogy. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think it's very apt. And like the parables of the New Testament, they're individual stories, fables, but they're also all of a piece for a single purpose. In that case, painting this picture of a unique kingdom. And I think Andrei Rublev, with this film, Tarkovsky is trying to ultimately paint a unified picture of what it means to make religious art. I think that, first of all, just generally speaking, to me, seeing this for the first time, and it's sort of the first time I went to see it, I've mentioned before, at Doc Films at University of Chicago in January, because they were screening it, and just knowing we had this marathon. So I have had the chance to see it twice in a couple of months, but still, in these recent months, it was the first time. I thought I'd seen all the Tarkovsky masterpieces, Adam. I was like, I've seen Nostalgia. I've seen Solaris Stalker. It's like, let me go catch up on this well-regarded. I certainly knew the movie's reputation, but knowing it was something of this biography picture, historical picture, sounded different than the films I was familiar with. Earlier movie, right? His second full feature. I thought, let me catch up with this one. Okay. Apparently the guy's up to what? 5 masterpieces in my mind. This thing is incredible. But yeah, going back to what you were saying and what Keith wrote specifically, this notion, I think he's very close when he says this was about Rublev's artistic development and the development of his soul, except I wouldn't have the and. I would put those two things together because I think they're exactly the same thing in terms of what Tarkovsky is interested in exploring in this movie, and thinking about it in context of the further films that he would go on to make. It's almost like he's setting the stage here for the rest of his career, because he's stating he's discovering, let me say, it feels like he's discovering the terms by which he's going to go on to make deeply spiritual cinematic films like Solaris, Stalker, Nostalgia, but they're not religious films, right? In the sense that we think of them. And so Andrei Rublev is all about an artist whose job is to make religious films. And what are we told about him very early on? One of his fellow painters says to Theophanes, he has no faith in his art, right? This guy's going through the motions, and he doesn't find that faith and that artistry until he's recognized that it must have a purpose beyond the religious realm. It must resonate outside of these cathedrals for it to have true artistry, true meaning, true religiosity, I would argue. And I do think, there's that early section which is comedic, but sets the stage for all of this when he and his fellow painters stop at this tavern. They're seeking shelter from the rain, right? And before they even arrive, we've been watching this performer, this jester, Roland Bykov is the actor, entertaining villagers with this crude and very lewd song and dance, right? And then Andrei and his fellow monks come in and they crash the party. Everyone gets quiet. They look at the jester askance. One of his companions says, God sent priests, but the devil sent jesters. Again, we're back to Sinners, drawing this line between the sacred and the secular, right? But notice in that sequence, Adam, the jester connects with the crowd. The monks sit in the corner. They're useless. The clown.
And judge,
of course. The clown goes out into the world. He leaves the tavern. He takes off his shirt and soaks in the rain. He's experiencing life. And I think this is setting the central questions the rest of the movie will explore. What good is religious art if it's lifeless, if it's disconnected from the human experience? When we get to these sections of cruelty and violence, all at the hands of supposedly religious leaders, these princes of Russia who demand these icons, but also are merciless. What happens when religious art is co-opted by the cruel and the powerful? And then here's the Tarkovsky question. Can art that isn't explicitly religious be faithful as well? This is what I think we see in his further films. And here it's almost like he's making the argument for that. So I really do think this is, as powerful as his later movies, if still sort of in this formative space for him as a filmmaker.
It's funny what you said about the jester and the importance you placed on that, because I was looking at my notes and one of the last things I wrote down watching at this time was that this movie seems to be fundamentally about fools.
Oh, yeah.
The characters.
Holy fools.
Yeah, that Tarkovsky is drawn to the most, that he is most sympathetic to, the characters who he thinks society needs to not only have perhaps more compassion for, but needs to allow more space for, are these fools. And that doesn't just mean because they're comedic. Foolish in this case also means that they are distancing themselves or in some way separating themselves from conventional society. I think that's why we have the prologue that we have. This story that otherwise is so disconnected, but isn't. And it is, in terms of filmmaking, bravura Tarkovsky, where that camera is elevating up into the sky from the point of view of this fool who has decided, despite the shouts that he is getting from the people down below, despite the absolute absurdity of this decision to try to fly, he pulls it off, doesn't he? And it does, as I said, feel disconnected because narratively it doesn't tie otherwise to our story, but it makes complete sense when you realize that the movie is filled with these types of characters, including Rublev himself, who is constantly going against society. constantly putting himself in a position where he is daring to do something that subverts norms or subverts expectations, including taking a vow of silence, as we see him later do. I think part of the complexity here of this film too, and the way Tarkovsky really gets at the human condition through Rublev, is having a character who can so clearly in one moment espouse this epiphany that he's had about his art. And it's in the chapter about the Last Judgment, where he seems to have a sort of painter's block. He's doing everything he can to distract himself from the job at hand. And he expresses it. It's because he doesn't feel like spreading that message of hellfire and punishment and suffering. That doesn't seem to resonate with him. And then he finally realizes that he wants to tell the story of a feast instead. So he can have that type of epiphany, Josh. He can understand that he's a man who doesn't believe in or doesn't want to espouse these ideas of hellfire and judgment and condemnation of his fellow man. But what does happen in that chapter with the pagans, I believe it's called The Feast, where as soon as they catch him spying on lovers and they are going to punish him, what does he do? He invokes fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
He tells them,
but that's earlier,
they're going to be punished. I think it is actually earlier.
It's earlier. So, yeah, it's part of his journey.
You could say that's part of his journey, and I think that would be fair. You could also look at it as a bit of a contradiction, because he invokes it when it suits him, and then later it doesn't completely feel right. But he hasn't yet had that moment where he's realized what the counter is, what he believes in instead, I suppose. So I guess that's why I'm kind of linking them. But you're right, ultimately, that I think that is part of that journey, that he's not this fully formed character. And not only that, of course, any artist is always developing. We're always developing as humans. But I think what I'm trying to express, Josh, is that this is a character who is constantly shifting, who, because of the conditions of the world that he lives in, because of the horrors that he witnesses, because of the ideas that he is constantly confronted with, he's malleable. He's trying to find what he really believes in. He's trying to commit to an ideology. And I like the fact that we see someone for a good portion of the film who is seeking, who is searching.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the fascinating part of this. And he is, I don't think we've even mentioned the actor portraying Rublev here, Anatoly Solzhenitsyn. And I will say, on this recent second viewing, I did appreciate his performance more because of that seeking quality, and that he's kind of like a Bresson, figure of struggling faith. He's what Ethan Hawke is doing in First Reformed. They're very much cinematic archetypes, but it is this striving, this seeking, this uncertainty, this lack of faith, this doubt that is torturing figures like this. And I think we very much get that in this performance, which is quite strong. Also, quickly, before I go back to that, is we've referenced a couple times all these horrors he witnesses. We should say, for people listening who haven't seen Andrei Rublev, one of these chapters is like basically a Kurosawa film, right?
It is.
Siege on
Ron, Seven Samurai, it's all there.
I mean, it's like, okay, let's just take 45 minutes to drop in a samurai masterpiece, but set in medieval Russia. This is the level of artistry we're working on here with Andrei Rublev. But yeah, I like also continuing your thought about Rublev's journey here, is that he has those qualms about painting The Last Judgment, strong language. He starts by saying something about it's not the smoke that matters, to his companion who's trying to figure out, why are you bothered by this? He says then, it disgusts me. Like this concept of damnation and hellfire disgusts me. And then later we notice there's another holy fool woman played by Irma Rausch who wanders into this cathedral that they're painting as a character is reading a New Testament passage about how women should cover their heads in worship. And this is obviously an ironic contrast. Here comes this woman into their manly space as they're reading this aloud, but it's also where Rublev says something like, she is not a sinner, even if she does not wear a scarf. And so we're seeing his spiritual development here, where he's transitioning away from the hellfire and damnation to a gospel of grace that he's beginning to embrace. And now the artistic tension is like, but is this what the people paying me to paint want? and how do I wrestle with that? And how do I be true to my art and my beliefs? So yeah, it is this journey of discovery on his part, which who knows how historical it is, but in terms of rooting it in this narrative and how it works on a meta level, to my mind, with Tarkovsky's development as an artist, I think is fascinating.
There's a lot that's fascinating about this film, and a lot that maybe, I think we used this word last week when we were talking about the first two films in this marathon, a lot that's meant to be mysterious and not perhaps understood. And yet you're drawn to try to make sense of it. And that even includes, Josh, lines of dialogue like the one in this film where Kirill, the character who's a painter who is kind of an adversary, seems to be a friend, but becomes kind of an adversary, feels a lot of jealousy towards Andrei because of his talent. He wants to be seen as a superior painter. He has greater ambition, but lacks that fundamental ability that his colleague seems to have. When he is just about to have his great unraveling, and he's in his room at the monastery, and I don't remember who is in the room and who says it to him, but the person says, "Why are you burning a candle in the daylight?" I'm still thinking about why are you burning a candle in the daylight? Why that's even something that character posed to him and how we might interpret it. But what it says about Kirill as a man, as a monk, as a painter, that he could be, I don't know, I suppose wasteful in that way, that he could feel as if even though it's daytime and he should be able to see everything he needs to say, he nevertheless feels the need to take in this bit of luxury, this bit of medieval luxury, if you will, or adorn his room in some way with that light. And a character, it seems, kind of calls him out on it.
Yeah. Kirill is fascinating, played by Ivan Lapikov, because I think he's also, if I'm remembering correctly, one of these figures you were referring to who disappears for long passages and then comes back in a way we don't immediately know, right? It's him. And then he has to confess. He has two confessions. First, who he actually is. And then later in the Bell section, he confesses when Andrei is mistaken by the jester from the early section for the monk who denounced him and led to his punishment. And it was actually Kirill. So yeah. Can we talk about the Bell section?
Yeah.
I mean, a masterpiece on its own, right? Like this, to me, this movie just has that, and you've got something that will stand the test of time. Now, obviously it builds on what came before, because I find it to be completely culminating this exploration of what does it mean to be an artist, let alone a religious artist. But really, what does it mean to be an artist? Like this is what the movie, or this section, the Bell section, offers a possibility, I will say, because I think with Tarkovsky, everything is a possibility, not necessarily an answer. But this is where we find the boy from Ivan's childhood.
Right.
Nikolai Burliev, who gave such a brilliant performance there as a kid a couple years younger, and here's this orphan teenager who convinces the prince that he has learned to cast church bells from his late father, is given the job, which means overseeing this massive team of adults. And we learn later, though suspect right away, he has no idea what he's doing. His father didn't teach him anything, but he proceeds anyway, and everyone follows him. What did you make of this passage?
Well, that's partly why, or a major part of why, I am talking about this film in terms of its emphasis on holy fools, or certainly fools.
Do you think the kid's a holy fool too?
I think the kid is. I think that's what really clinched it for me, is that he's another character, Josh, who, you said it, turns out he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. And I don't know if you can really say that he's going just off of faith. There's something.
What's motivating him? It's a great question.
Either deeper or more superficial that's driving him. Maybe he just appreciates the power. But for whatever reason, he takes the same leap off the church that the guy at the beginning does, right? When he flies with the balloon. He is putting himself in danger, there is no reason on this earth, in this world, that he should pull this off.
Yes.
He is completely flying without a net. And the punishment for failure here is severe. As we like to say here on Filmspotting, the stakes could not be higher. That is constantly reinforced throughout this entire section. What exactly could go wrong and the type of punishment that will befall him if he doesn't pull this off. And yet, Josh, he is a fool. He doesn't know exactly what he's doing. He is just hoping that through the force of his own will that he is going to pull it off. That's the test. That's another example for me why it feels a bit like a parable. It isn't supposed to necessarily make sense that we believe that this character could do it. We believe it, though, in the context of this story. So yeah, that's where that really came from for me. That idea was that character.
And just to talk a little bit about the filmmaking before circling back to the meaning, but the patience and the attention to the steps of this craft, from finding the right clay, which he stumbles upon in the rain, and incredible. I mean, the rain, so much rain in this movie. I mean, water. It's Tarkovsky, right?
More water.
But he's baptized when he finds the right clay. That shot, and from having to mold the bell in the earth to raising it up to the molding of it with, how about the streams of like burning, I don't know what material it is, lead or silver, but it's glowing. This is a black and white film, but it's glowing behind this kid conjuring, this fool / wizard conjuring these streams of light to, I mean, the filmmaking here is just incredible. But to connect it with some of these other things we've been talking about. So Andrei Rublev at this point is still in his vow of silence, living, near this city, the prince's city, where the bell is being cast, and observing it from afar. And so he's watching this kid. And I would say, similar to the way you've been describing it, that Rublev experiences the creation of this bell as a miraculous revelation. I mean, he's been on this journey of seeking inspiration. He's found it here a little bit, but then the sack of the city and the violence that he experienced and witnessed caused him to give everything up, take on the vow of silence. He's left his work behind. But here I think what he discovers, and the holy fool part is an element of this, that art emerges from talent, but also from beyond himself.
Right.
He's a vessel. Rublev discovers that he's a vessel, just like this kid is a vessel for the miracle. And I almost don't want to give it away, because you are right. You're in such suspense. Is that bell going to toll? Are we going to hear anything? I'm almost positive. I meant to rewatch it today, but I think when we hear the bell, the camera is on Rublev's face. And he has been a very side figure in this whole passage.
Yeah,
we see him watching. He's an observer in the background. But the moment the movie has been building to, in my mind, we're back on his face. And it kind of seems like that is the clarity where he realizes it's about more than me. I may have been gifted talent, but I need to release a little bit of this control, because I am, as an artist, a vessel. And I do think it connects, Adam, with another brilliant visual motif throughout this film. And it's something Tarkovsky returns to in different ways. Water, again, is here. But we see many times a paintbrush with white paint being held in a stream.
I was going to go there, Josh. My favorite image in the film, maybe.
It's gorgeous. And what happens is the paint just kind of diffuses, but travels as the water travels.
Yeah.
And it's this abstract beauty. Here's the key, that the person putting the brush in the water never intended.
It's a new creation
beyond that.
That's in the process of unfolding before your eyes.
And who knows what it means? They were a part of it. They needed to be there for it to happen.
Right.
It's not accidental, but they were also something of a vessel. And so I think that's what Rublev, to my mind, discovers by the end of this movie. And pointedly, in the historical context, he goes on to make, after this period in his life, according to what history we know, his greatest piece, the Trinity, his greatest icon, the one that's the most revered. So it's just interesting to see how historically this could be understood as an epiphany moment for him. But I think it might be the same for Tarkovsky, man. I mean, I think it's like him understanding, you've referenced this idea of mystery. Like, these movies I'm making, I'm maybe a vessel for them. Like, I don't, and this is why they're so confounding and we're intimidated by them, and why we'll never find the answer to them, because I don't know if Tarkovsky knows the answer to all of them.
Sure. It's as if he has to, with this film, he's reminding himself, or he's proving to himself, the lesson that Rublev learns, I think, as you're articulating, that there are all these reasons to feel like this is probably pointless, or that this beauty or this attempted beauty is not appreciated by society. Is it something society even needs? I think it goes back to the steamroller and the violin too, in that way.
Yeah, that's
posing that question, and ultimately coming to a realization that you kind of have no choice. It's the only thing ultimately you can do, or certainly you can do if you're someone like Rublev, or you're someone like Tarkovsky, who is a unique visionary artist. And that is definitely on display here. I'm so glad that you mentioned the brushes, because that moment where I think it's Foma, who I didn't know totally what to make of it. And now it's starting to, as we talk it out, it's starting to be clear to me. I just liked it as an image, and I liked it as a singular Tarkovsky image, because we've already talked through this marathon, and with Mir, we've talked about water and how he uses it in so many different ways. But the idea, it's almost like by putting that brush in the water, it creates something new. As I said, something that's forming. It's in the process of forming itself before your eyes. Something is disturbed. Something is disturbed. The water that's flowing is disturbed by the introduction of a new liquid by someone's hand.
It's a new thing.
And that creates something new. And it actually creates an effect, Josh. It's like, the only thing I could write down, I don't even know if I'm using this word correctly, but it's like tributaries. It's like within the water, new streams are formed, right? New streams are formed, which makes sense with some of the imagery we've seen from Tarkovsky already. But there's another moment of that in this film, Josh, and my notes aren't entirely clear. I have post-attack, so it must be after the raid. Something like some kind of milk or a liquid gets spilled into the water, and the exact same tributary-like thing forms with that introduction of that liquid in the water. And then I love, it's almost a match cut Tarkovsky gives us from that spilling of that liquid in the water to then paint being thrown at the wall.
There is. Yes.
Right. So that's a great kind of visual play on a motif that Tarkovsky obviously is enamored with. We also get here, and I didn't know coming into this marathon, I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't know a thing for Tarkovsky. I didn't know that until I saw that incredible scene amongst the birch trees in Ivan's childhood, that this would be a recurring motif, even with the films I've seen, not considering them back to back like this. What happens, Josh, in one of the early sequences in this film? They are walking amongst those same types of birch trees, those white trees. They even comment on them. I think
you never notice it until you leave, right?
That's what until you leave. And there's even a moment, Josh, with those trees where the characters in the scene are walking across the trees, kind of like they're on a tightrope, which is exactly how they're walking across them in Ivan's childhood. So that was something that stood out to me, the symbolism of those trees, the power of those trees for Tarkovsky, obviously very intentional. But again, the use of water here, and the use of water in layered varying ways by introducing new bits of liquid into the mix was a real standout for me as well. I feel like, Josh, this is the movie in a lot of ways that's the answer to the biopic conundrum. And the secret is not only just have someone as visionary as Tarkovsky creating the images,
that helps.
but just don't be encumbered in any way by
facts,
events, signposts,
the
things they actually did. Like, he's a painter. We don't ever see him paint. We don't see any of the painting. We'll give you some art at the end. Otherwise, we're going to give you a story that seems very loosely based on who this man ultimately is.
Yeah, what did you make of that? Speaking of the end, where this has all been in black and white, and then we get this long section of close-ups of some of the icons painted by Rublev as this, choral music from the period is playing on the soundtrack. And it gives you a chance. Obviously, there's an obvious reason and what it means. It gives you a chance to see the art, the actual art. To your point, out of context of him sitting at sitting down to actually do it. So I appreciated that. I mean, it's you see this in other Tarkovsky movies, like I think it's The Hunters in the Snow, the Bruegel the Elder painting shows up in Solaris, and we spend a lot of time of the camera just poring over it in detail. So it's a thing he likes to do. Did you find that additive? Did you,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's another one of those very daring formal choices that completely pays off. And I think the reason it pays off is that it's the culmination of everything we've tried to speak to during this conversation, which is what this movie is really about is what, ironically, all biopics about artists try to be about, which is what are the experiences and the perspectives that shape the artists and the work that they do. But by disconnecting them the way that Tarkovsky has, making it so the film itself isn't about the art at all or showcasing the art, and it's only at the end that we get it, it really does make us feel as if he was finally only capable of doing that work because of all of these experiences.
Yeah.
I love that separation of it. I think it's very potent.
Yeah, that's good. That's the time when we need the historical record is at that moment, rather than interspersed to sort of justify or, try to historically root your narrative. Earlier, it would have been distracting, but here it is a very nice exclamation point.
You mentioned shades of Kurosawa here, or at least filmmaking on that scale. I can't remember if it's Scott or Keith who mentioned it, but were you like them and like me thinking about during the Bell sequence, Werner Herzog, and thinking about Fitzcarraldo? Not only another fool character, right, in Fitzcarraldo, pulling off the unthinkable, pulling off a miracle, but I was thinking about the character. I was also thinking about the filmmaker. I was watching that, and real quick, this now made me think, Josh, as well. When you brought up, I also loved that imagery of the lead, whatever that molten substance is. But Josh, that's another tributary-like visual.
Yeah, that's true.
Isn't it? It's as if these rivers of that liquid are cascading down. But I was thinking about the work. The entire time I was just thinking about the physical work it must have taken. The people working on this film, the production designers, anyone involved with making this film, and Tarkovsky himself, to so specifically and in such a detailed way render the creation of that bell and the hoisting of that bell, the pulling of the levers, the pulleys there on the rope. It made me think about the boat going over the mountain in Fitzcarraldo. And I can't believe he did it. I can't believe he pulled it off.
I don't know if we've communicated the scale of this film. I mean, we've talked about the Kurosawa thing, but so many of these sequences have, they're establishing shots where important things are happening in the foreground with characters we know. But if you look way in the background, there's like 50 or 60 people doing something period appropriate. And frequently there are animals like just walking across the screen. I think it's another key thing with Tarkovsky where he's not Kubrick in the sense that, I mean, for a lot of reasons, but he has control, but not the Kubrickian level of control of the frame. Like he seems to be open to chaos.
Yeah.
In a way, with the incorporation of animals, like I said, frequently, but also, many extras doing their own thing. Nature, the way nature intrudes or is like, recreated to seem to intrude. But yeah, that also seems to be a unique quality of his. But just the scale of this movie, Andrei Rublev alone is incredible to behold.
Maybe as we get through a few more films, we'll be able to make better sense of how he is using animals and the symbolic nature, because the final frame of this film is horses, not men. And dogs recur a lot in this film.
Yes.
Including in key moments like when Kirill finally renounces this world, the monastic world, and decides to go out and join civilization again. His dog, who he otherwise seems to quite love and dote on, in this moment, the dog runs towards him, and what does he do? He beats the dog. The fact that Tarkovsky felt the need to show that type of brutality from Kirill in that moment by beating a dog, and then dogs are a constant presence swirling throughout that entire raid, Josh, as well. So
just when I think,
thought I'd mention it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just when I think that I have a decent handle, not a full handle, but a decent handle in Andrei Rublev, it ends with those final 20 seconds of a color footage of 3 or 4 horses along a stream. It's sunny, but also raining on them. And what's that all about, man? I mean,
right.
Like, come on. Like I thought I was doing good here. And now I'm lost in mystery once again.
If you would like to elucidate that mystery for us, we'd love to hear from you. You can share any other comments about the show as well. Feedback at filmspotting.net. Andrei Rublev is streaming on the Criterion channel and Max. It's also available at VOD. Next up, we are taking a week off, but we will come back and reckon with one of my blind spots, 1979 Stalker. More information, filmspotting.net/marathons. Josh, that's our show.
If you want to find Adam and the show on Instagram, Facebook, or Letterboxd, he's at Filmspotting. I'm at all those places as well. You can find me at Larson on Film. We are independently produced and listener supported. You can support the show by joining the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. You can listen early and ad-free. You'll also get a weekly newsletter, monthly bonus shows, and access to the entire show archive, for show t-shirts, or, we still have some Film Spotting Fest posters available. Go to filmspotting.net/shop.
In the Film Spotting archive, you can find conversations about other Ryan Coogler films, including Fruitvale Station. That was episode 456. Black Panther 668. Wakanda Forever 898. It looks like we did not give Creed a proper review on the show. We did review Creed 2, directed by Stephen Cable Jr. That was episode 707. Streaming this weekend, you can see Havoc. This stars Tom Hardy. This is how Sam has described it. Tom Hardy as jaded cop in Netflix movie.
He didn't even get a name?
Well, not with Sam anyway. Directed by Gareth Evans, who made The Raid. Out wide, you could see Ben Affleck and John Bernthal in The Accountant 2. Is The Accountant review in the Film Spotting archive, Josh? I can't remember.
I know I didn't see it. And why do I think The Accountant 2 came out like 5 months ago? This is new?
We have been seeing trailers forever.
Okay, that must be.
You're not wrong there. The Legend of Ochi is also out. Josh gave that a few minutes and does recommend that film. In limited release, a documentary about the comedy duo Cheech and Chong. It's Cheech and Chong's last movie, Magic Farm, a movie that features a film crew working for an edgy magazine, traveling to South America to fabricate a trend. Okay. Chloe Sevigny, Alex Wolff, and Simon Rex co-star. On Swift Horses is out. Robert Daniels says it's a slow-burning 1950s set noir western driven by carnal appetites and a longing to break free from societal expectations. It stars Jacob Elordi and Daisy Edgar Jones. David Cronenberg's The Shroud is also out in select cities, with Vincent Cassel as a man who invents a technology that allows him to, I suppose that's accurate, monitor the dead, with Diane Kruger. I also did want to give a quick mention, Josh, to a movie called Jimmy in Saigon, a documentary directed by Peter McDowell that I think actually counts as a 2022 film, played a lot of different festivals, but is just now getting a release at the Cinema Village in New York City this weekend. And it's a documentary about the filmmaker, Peter McDowell, who grew up. He was the baby of the family. I think there were 5 kids total, and had the oldest sibling, Jimmy, who he barely knew because of the age difference, and also because Jimmy went off to Vietnam and didn't come back. And the circumstances surrounding his death were mysterious, and part of the mystery was that his family just never talked about it. his parents, his other siblings, they seem to always want to kind of keep this a secret. And so what McDowell does is he tries to unravel the mystery of what did happen to his brother back in Saigon, his experiences post-war there. And I do think if you have a chance to see Jimmy in Saigon, it's a film worth checking out. Next week, Filmspotting goes to the library, The Shrouds with author Violet Lucas. She just wrote a book about David Cronenberg called Clinical Trials. And Blindspotting, we'll be looking at Gina Prince Bythewood's Love and Basketball at 25 with Mariah Gates. She's the author of Cinema Her Way, Visionary Female Directors in Their Own Words.
Filmspotting is produced by Golden Joe Dassault and Sam Van Halgren. Without Sam and Golden Joe, this show wouldn't go. Our production assistant is Sophie Kempenaar. Special thanks to everyone at WBEZ Chicago. More information is available at wbez.org. For Filmspotting, I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenaar. Thanks for listening.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Filmspotting is listener supported. Join the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com and get access to ad-free episodes, monthly bonus shows, our weekly newsletter, and for the first time, all in one place, the entire Filmspotting archive going back to 2005. That's at filmspottingfamily.com.